I always thought betrayal would come with warning sign shadows and phone calls, secretive texts, awkward glances, but no. Mine came with a venomous snake bite and a phone call at 2 a.m.
Dr.
Carter, we have a patient in critical condition cardiac arrest due to snake venom. Please report to the or immediately. I blinked at the hospital corridor's clock, frozen in disbelief. The glowing red numbers burned into my brain. This was the exact moment Adam, my husband, had been rushed in last time. My heart skipped.
Was I dreaming?
No, this couldn't be a dream. I was back. I was reborn. My hands trembled as I clutched the phone tighter, the nurse on the line repeating my name with increasing urgency.
Dr.
Carter? Are you there? In my past life, I had run to the or like a madwoman, desperate to save the man I loved. I remembered gripping the scalpel, cutting through flesh and venom like my own body was on the table, only to later discover that Adam hadn't been working late like he claimed he'd had been in the woods with his precious Vanessa, playing wilderness lovers until karma slithered up and bit them. I saved him. I poured everything into saving him. But after he was stable, Vanessa stormed into my office like a rabid dog, dragging a pack of people with her, screaming that I had murdered her soulmate. Before I could even process the insanity, they pinned me down and broke both of my hands. Yeah, the hands I used to save lives. The hands I used to save him. You monster, she screamed. You let him die out of revenge. I tried to explain his vitals were stable. The surgery was successful, but she smashed his death certificate against my head and kept shrieking that I was a drunk doctor who wanted him dead. And the worst part? My in-laws, same people who smiled at our wedding, who said I was like a daughter, called the cops on me, saying they smelled alcohol on me. Said I was operating under the influence. The police found 2 wine bottles in my drawer, bottles I'd never touched, but of course they had my fingerprints. Of course my blood test came back positive. I was disbarred, disgraced, and sentenced to 15 years. 15. I kept telling myself it was a bad dream. But the real nightmare came after I got out. I saw Adam, very much alive, driving the car I bought, living in the house I paid for, holding hands with Vanessa and a boy who looked just like her. Happy family of 3, while I was the villain left rotting in the public's memory. I went to confront them, and you know what they did? They pushed me into a cement tank and tried to erase me completely. I died with cement choking my lungs, and I thought that was it. But I opened my eyes and Boomy was back in the hallway, back at the clock, back to the moment Adam was wheeled in. The second chance I never thought I'd get.
Dr.
Carter, the nurse called again. I took a deep breath. Get another doctor on duty, I replied flatly and hung up. Then I marched to my office, pulled open my drawer, and just as I thought, it was empty.
No battles. Not yet.
Which meant someone had planted them last time while I was in surgery. My mind raced. Could it have been Vanessa? My father-in-law? Both. I opened my computer and switched on the camera. The recording function blinked to life. I turned off the monitor, but kept it running. This time, I wouldn't give them a single crack to slip through. That's when the door slammed open. Vanessa stood there like a soap opera villain, all messy hair and fake concern. Rachel, what are you doing just sitting here? Adam's dying. The nurse called you. You're his wife. My stomach churned. Her performance was Oscar-worthy. I blinked slowly, then widened my eyes. Adam's the snakebite victim?
What are you talking about?
He just called Mayhay's working late at the office. Her expression flickered, just for a second, before she snapped back into character. You don't believe me? Why would I lie about something like this? I stared at her, masking my disgust. Funny. If this is real, why did the nurse call you first instead of me, his wife? Were you together? That shut her up real quick. She hesitated, eyes darting, then barked. This isn't the time to argue. If you don't go now, he'll die. She reached to grab me, but I dodged. Are you sure it's him? I asked, narrowing my eyes. Another nurse arrived and quietly whispered, Dr. Carter, the patient really is named Adam Carter. It might be best to confirm. Vanessa jumped on it.
See.
You believe me now, right? Stop wasting time. I caught the smug little curl at the corner of her mouth. She wanted me in that, or...
Badly. But why?
To frame me again? To plant evidence while I was gone? I glanced at my recording camera. then nodded slowly.
Fine.
Let's go check on my husband. And just like that, the game began again. But this time, I wasn't the pawn. I was the player. I didn't rush into the operating room, like last time. I didn't let adrenaline cloud my judgment. Instead, I changed slowly into my sterile gown while Vanessa paced outside like an actress preparing for her scene. Let her sweat. Let her wonder why I wasn't panicking. When I finally walked into the OR, the doctor in charge practically jumped at me, his face pale and desperate.
Dr.
Carter, thank God you're here. The patient's in cardiac arrest. We've already pushed atropine, no response. His vitals are tanking. I kept my expression unreadable, even as my eyes fell on Adam's face deathly pale, lips turning blue. My heart used to break at that sight. Now it barely flinched. Because I knew this man I once called my husband had faked his own death to send me to prison. Had smiled with Vanessa while I rotted in a cell. I forced my gaze to the monitor. His heartbeat was a flat line, pulse faint. I turned to the nurse. Have you exhausted all resuscitation protocols? She nodded quickly. Everything compressions, ventilation, epinephrine. Nothing's working. I let out a soft sigh, then stared at the clock. Call time of death, I said quietly, and left the room without a second glance. No one questioned it. After all, I was the wife, the surgeon, the one in authority. But this time, I didn't cry in the bathroom or scream into my scrubs. I went straight to the on-call lounge, locked the door, and waited. Because I remembered exactly what was coming next. In my last life, Vanessa showed up with a mob, stormed into my private office, broke my hands, and made sure I was thrown to the wolves.
Not this time.
This time, I wasn't going to play the lonely scapegoat. I sat in the busy shared office with the other doctors and nurses, timing it perfectly. The place was packed with witnesses, all chatting as the shift changed. I sipped coffee and kept one eye on the clock, the other on the hallway. And right on cue, like bad déjà vu, Vanessa's shrill voice echoed from the corridor. Rachel Carter, come out here. You killed my fiancé, and you call yourself a doctor? A second later, the door burst open. She charged in, flanked by a group of angry relatives like it was some courtroom drama. Her eyes locked on mine. There she is. Don't let her get away. In my last life, I was alone when this happened. But this time, I stood up calmly and stayed right next to the other staff. Someone immediately shouted, "Excuse me? This is a secure space. Who the hell are you?" A young male doctor stepped forward, blocking Vanessa. You can't just barge in here and cause chaos. We'll call the cops. Call them, Vanessa screamed. She let Adam die out of spite. She's a cold-blooded killer. The room went dead silent for a beat, then erupted in confusion. Another doctor who'd been in the OR last night snapped. What are you talking about? He was barely alive when he got here. We did everything we could. But Vanessa was ready for that. She reached into her bag and pulled out a death certificate, slapping it on the desk like it was her ace. Here's the proof. Untimely rescue. Negligence. She let him die on purpose. I picked it up and read it carefully. Last time, I hadn't paid attention, I was too emotional. But this time, I caught the detail immediately. This certificate wasn't issued by our hospital, I said loudly, holding it up. It's from a random clinic. Not even a tertiary care center. Why would you bypass our own pathology team unless you had something to hide? That struck a nerve. Her face twitched, but she quickly pivoted. The nurse called you last night, and you refused to operate. You didn't even show up until I begged you in person.
People saw it.
You abandoned him. She gestured to a couple of nurses behind her like they were backup singers. I stared her down. You mean the same nurses who were conveniently out of the room while someone planted wine bottles in my drawer? Gasps spread through the room. Vanessa faltered. I continued. Because funny thing, I already checked me drawer was empty. Until I left for surgery. I looked straight into the eyes of every person watching. This time, I'm not letting someone rewrite my story. I demand an autopsy. And I want the police to open an investigation into who moved my husband's body without my consent. That's when I heard an old, familiar voice cutting through the crowd. I gave permission, my father-in-law said, stepping in, looking heartbroken. My stomach dropped. Same act, same lines. He walked up slowly, police in tow, then slapped me so hard I tasted blood. You disgrace. We treated you like family, and you repay us by drinking on the job and killing our son. My ears rang, but I kept my cool. He turned to the cops. She drinks often. I told you the wine bottles are in her drawer. Check her office. And just like that, the police nodded and moved to investigate. As expected, they came back minutes later with 2 empty wine bottles in evidence bags. The shift in the room was instant. Faces turned cold, expressions twisted in judgment. Even the doctors who defended me before stepped back. Vanessa smirked like a cat that just cornered a mouse. There it is. What more proof do you need? But instead of breaking down, I straightened my coat, pointed at Vanessa and my father-in-law, and said loud and clear, "Officers, I'd like to file a formal complaint." These two framed me. My words sent the entire room into stunned silence. The same father-in-law who used to smile warmly at me during Sunday dinners suddenly looked like a ghost caught in daylight, his expression flickering between outrage and panic, while Vanessa's smug grin twitched slightly at the edges. My mother-in-law wasted no time jumping in with fake tears and trembling hands, pushing past the officers and pointing right at me like I'd just strangled her puppy. "You heartless witch. You killed my only son, and now you're trying to frame his grieving father? What kind of monster are you?" She clung to Vanessa for support, sobbing on cue while the younger woman patted her back like this was all some twisted stage play. Vanessa turned to the cops and pleaded, "Please, officer, don't let her manipulate you. She's dangerous. Delusional. She needs to pay for what she did." Her tone was syrupy sweet but laced with venom, every syllable designed to make me look like the villain. One of the officers glanced between us, clearly caught in the storm of conflicting accusations, then spoke cautiously. "Dr. Carter, you said you were framed. Do you have any proof?" I stared him dead in the eye. If I had it right now, I wouldn't be standing here defending myself. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove my innocence.
Start with a blood test.
Test me for alcohol content. If I was drunk during surgery, it'll show up. My father-in-law's eyes widened a little too much. My mother-in-law stiffened. Vanessa's nails dug into her arm like she needed to remind herself to stay calm. "Are you sure you want to do that?" Vanessa asked, voice faltering for just a breath. "I mean, there's already evidence in the drawer. Isn't that enough?" I gave her a cold smile. "Funny. Weren't you just begging the police to believe I was drunk? Shouldn't you be thrilled I'm volunteering for a test?" I turned to the officer. "Let's do it.
Right now."
And that's how I ended up at the station within the hour, arm outstretched while a nurse drew several vials of blood. I stared at the crimson liquid filling the tubes like it held the power to either ruin me again or finally redeem me. As I waited for the results, the interrogation room door creaked open, and my mother-in-law walked in like she hadn't just accused me of murder in public. Her voice had transformed from hysterical to honeyed concern. "Rachel, sweetie, listen to me. Just admit what happened. We know it wasn't intentional. You didn't mean for Adam to die, right?" Her eyes shimmered like she was the world's most forgiving mother. "If you confess now, your father-in-law and I will write a letter of understanding for the court. It'll go easier for you." I couldn't believe it. In my last life, I had thought this speech came from mercy. Now I knew it was all a calculated move to lock me in a guilty plea before the results could clear my name. But this time, I wasn't that naive. "You're worried," I said, watching her eyes tighten. "You're afraid the test might not go your way, aren't you?" Her smile wavered, and before she could respond, Vanessa burst into the room like it was choreographed. "How dare you talk to your mother-in-law like that? She's offering you a lifeline, and you're throwing it away. Don't blame us when you rot in prison." "Oh, I'm not blaming you," I said casually, leaning back in the chair. "I'm just wondering why you're so eager to get me convicted for something I didn't do. Especially now that Adam is actually dead. What's in it for you? And why are you both acting so calm?" My voice trailed off on purpose, watching them closely. Vanessa's eyes twitched. My mother-in-law shifted in her seat, her hands clenching for a brief moment before relaxing. That's when I knew they weren't mourning. They were managing. They didn't look like grieving parents who just lost their only son. They looked like people trying to clean up a mess. And it was in that moment I realized there was something much deeper happening, something they were hiding from even themselves. Let me ask you something, I said slowly. Why do you keep referring to Adam as your only son? My mother-in-law blinked. Because he is.
Funny.
I've heard people say that about children they raised, not children they gave birth to. The flash of panic on her face was like a lightning bolt. Vanessa rushed to her side. That's enough, Rachel. You're out of control. Am I? I said quietly. Or am I just asking the right questions? Just then, the door opened again, and a uniformed officer walked in with a folder. He glanced at me and said, Dr. Carter, we have your blood alcohol results. I stood up, hands calm, face expressionless, even as my heart thudded like a war drum. He opened the folder and read, Your blood tested positive for ethanol. There's alcohol in your system. We're going to need you to come with us for further questioning. Vanessa's face lit up like Christmas morning.
I didn't resist.
I didn't say a word. I simply followed the officer out the door, locking eyes with Vanessa for one fleeting second, watching her smile like she'd finally won. But she had no idea, none of them did, that I already had my next move planned. And this time, I was going to blow everything up. The holding cell was cold, but not as cold as the stares I got the next morning when the news broke. Surgeon arrested for operating drunk and killing husband. The headline screamed. The media didn't even wait for an official indictment, just ran with it like vultures circling a corpse. I was dragged into the station's press room in handcuffs, wearing a gray jumpsuit and a blank expression, but inside I was burning. I knew what they were doing: turn the public against me first, let the court of opinion do the damage before the court of law ever opens its doors. When they seated me behind the long table for the press conference, I saw them: Vanessa in a perfectly pressed black dress, crocodile tears already welling in her eyes, and my so-called in-laws sitting beside her like actors rehearsing grief. The room was packed with reporters, cameras, flashbulbs, and that suffocating silence before the storm. A man in uniform read off the official statement like a robot. Dr. Rachel Carter is under investigation for practicing medicine under the influence of alcohol, resulting in the death of her husband, Adam Carter. Blood tests and physical evidence have confirmed the presence of alcohol in both her bloodstream and her office. That was the moment the cameras turned on me, zooming in, waiting for me to cry or scream or beg. But I didn't. I leaned forward, looked right into the lens, and said in the clearest voice I could muster, I was framed. The room erupted. Reporters jumped out of their seats, shouting questions. One woman stood up and yelled, Are you denying the toxicology results? Are you saying the evidence is fake? I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could speak, the back doors slammed open, and in walked someone I hadn't expected to see this soon: Julia Lynn, an attorney from Yarrow and Finch. Sharp suit, fierce eyes, and a confidence that silenced the room. My name is Julia Lynn, she announced, walking straight to the front.
I'm representing Dr.
Carter, and we are prepared to present evidence that not only proves her innocence, but exposes a conspiracy to destroy her life. The entire room turned to chaos again. Vanessa stood up, face flushed with panic. This is nonsense. She's trying to dodge responsibility. Sit down, Miss Brooks, Julia snapped, unless you want to be the first to answer questions under oath. Vanessa froze. I leaned back and watched Julia open her briefcase and pull out a small bottle, one I recognized instantly. The bottle of nutrient supplement Adam had handed me days ago, the one he'd insisted I drink before bed. Julia placed it on the table with a cold smile. This bottle was given to Dr. Carter by her husband, Adam Carter, shortly before the incident. Toxicology reports show that it was laced with ethanol. Intentionally. My mouth went dry. I had suspected it, prayed I was wrong, but seeing that bottle confirmed everything. Julia continued unfazed. We also have surveillance footage from Dr. Carter's home. Footage that Adam Carter deleted from the house system, except he didn't know it was backed up to her cloud. The footage shows him pouring vodka into the supplement bottle. Gasps echoed through the press room. My in-laws sat frozen, faces pale. Vanessa looked like she was about to faint. But Julia wasn't done. She flipped open another file and handed it to the officers at the front. In addition, we have video evidence from Dr. Carter's office computer showing Vanessa Brooks entering the room after Dr. Carter had left for surgery. The footage clearly shows her placing 2 empty wine bottles into the drawer wearing gloves. She let that sink in before dropping the final bombshell. And one more thing. A week prior, Vanessa invited Dr. Carter to dinner, got her drunk, then secretly collected the bottles and stored them. We have that on video, too. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw the fear set in. Vanessa's lips trembled. My father-in-law's fists clenched on the table. My mother-in-law leaned forward, whispering something to Vanessa I couldn't hear. The reporters were now fully fixated on the three of them, no longer hunting method found new prey. One brave journalist raised his mic and asked, "Ms.
Brooks, you said Dr. Carter was like a sister to you.
Why would you frame her like this?" Vanessa didn't answer. She couldn't. The truth was pouring out now, and nothing could stop it. But I wasn't done yet. I stood up, took Julia's tablet, and played the last piece of evidence I had saved for this exact momentous surveillance clip from my own living room, taken the week after my wedding. It showed Adam and Vanessa together, giggling like teenagers, making out like I didn't exist. Then came the audio. Adam's voice crystal clear. "Every time I touch Rachel, I feel like throwing up. But we have to be patient. Once her reputation's ruined and her license revoked, all her money becomes ours. You, me, and our baby will be untouchable." Vanessa's voice replied, just as clearly, "Don't worry, baby. With my godparents helping, she'll never see it coming." The room exploded. Reporters screamed questions. Officers started moving. I stood still, calm in the chaos, watching the three people who ruined me get swallowed by their own lies. This wasn't just justice, it was revenge, served cold, in high definition. The press conference was supposed to be my execution, but it turned into their funeral. Within minutes of that final surveillance video going live, the internet did what it does best: burned everything to the ground. Justice for Dr. Carter started trending before I even left the room. Public sentiment flipped like a light switch. The same people who were calling me a monster hours ago were now dissecting every second of Adam and Vanessa's betrayal, dragging them harder than I ever could. He faked his death, framed his own wife, and plotted to steal her career. What kind of sociopath does that? One post read, "Vanessa Brooks really thought she could gaslight a trauma surgeon with cloud storage? Girl, bye." Another one said, "I didn't even have to lift a finger. Their lives were unraveling in real time, and all I had to do was watch." But this wasn't just about online humiliation. The law finally started catching up. Vanessa was officially charged with evidence tampering, assault, and malicious framing. My in-laws Richard and Martha Carter weren't charged due to their age and alleged poor health, but karma wasn't so lenient. Just 3 days after the press conference, Richard died of a heart attack in his sleep. Martha followed 2 weeks later, bedridden from stress and shame. I won't pretend I felt nothing.
I did.
I felt closure. They chose Vanessa over me, lied to the world, sold their own son's death like it was a coupon. And for what? Blood that wasn't even theirs. Yeah, that's right, I found the DNA reports while cleaning out their house. 2 dusty envelopes hidden behind books on a shelf. One said Adam wasn't their biological son. The other said Vanessa was. Everything clicked. That's why they backed her no matter what. That's why they were so eerily calm when Adam died for real. He was just a pawn, a placeholder. She was the real heir to their twisted affection. No wonder they hated me for standing in her way. I cremated them both out of obligation, buried their ashes next to Adam's like some poetic finale, and walked away without shedding a single tear. It was over. The people who destroyed me in my last life were either dead, disgraced, or locked up. I should have felt free. But revenge is funny like that. It doesn't always give you peace, just space. I didn't know what to do with it yet. A few days later, Julia invited me out for coffee, said she wanted to check in now that everything had died down. I met her at a quiet cafe near the courthouse, the kind of place with overpriced lattes and minimalist chairs. She slid a drink toward me with a soft smile. "It's a lavender cocktail. Pretty good, actually." I pulled my hand back like she'd offered me a glass of poison. "No thanks. I've had enough surprise alcohol to last 3 lifetimes." She laughed, nodded, and didn't push. After a few minutes of silence, she leaned forward and said, "I have to ask you something. How did you stay so calm through all this? The press, the prison, The betrayal, if it were me, I would have lost it completely. I looked at her and smiled faintly, because I already lived through it once. She blinked, confused, and I didn't explain. I couldn't. Who would believe that I'd been reborn? That I'd seen the whole thing before, suffered through the humiliation, the injury, the 15 years behind bars, the cement tank, the suffocation, the hopelessness? Who would believe that the first time I met Julia Lynn, she wasn't my lawyer, she was just a spectator who believed I might be innocent when no one else did. But that version of me was broken. Powerless. This time, I didn't give up. This time, I put the scalpel down and picked up the truth. Julia smiled again and said, "Well, however you did it, you've got my respect. And if you ever want to work on medical justice cases, give me a call. We could use someone like you." I gave her a small nod.
I didn't say yes.
I didn't say no. I just let the offer sit there. I had no idea what came next. I only knew one thing for sure this time. I wasn't going to let anyone else write my story for me. I used to think freedom would feel like fireworks or some massive emotional release, like I'd step out of the fire and suddenly feel healed, but the truth is, freedom felt more like silence. Not the empty kind, but the peaceful kind, the type of silence that comes after a storm when everything has already been destroyed and there's finally space to rebuild. After everything went public after Vanessa's sentence, my ex-in-law's death, and my medical license was officially reinstated, I didn't rush to celebrate. I didn't throw a party or post a viral TikTok with some catchy voiceover about revenge. I just moved out of the apartment where Adam once handed me poison disguised as love and found a new place with zero memories in it. The walls were plain, the fridge was empty, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't haunted by anything.
No ghosts, no gaslighting, no guilt.
Just me. And it was enough. I packed up my old things carefully, not because they were worth keeping, but because I needed the ritual. I threw out Adam's shirts, Vanessa's fake designer perfume, the last pair of scrubs I wore before my license was ripped from me, and every stupid photo frame where I pretended I was part of a happy family. I kept one thing, the original medical school ID, the one with the crooked smile and tired eyes. I looked at that photo and realized something wild. I missed her. I missed the woman I was before I got married, before I gave up my boundaries for love, before I trusted people who saw me as nothing more than a stepping stone. That version of me wasn't perfect, but at least she was real. She believed in herself. She believed in saving lives. And for the first time in years, I wanted to find her again. I didn't go back to the same hospital. That place was too full of politics and poison. Instead, I took a position at a small community clinic 3 cities over. No high-stakes surgeries, no paparazzi outside the ear, just me, a stethoscope, and patients who didn't know my name from viral headlines. It was quiet.
Honest.
Healing. Word got around eventually, of course. A few patients whispered about that one doctor who'd been on the news, the one whose husband tried to frame her and ended up dying for real. But no one treated me like a criminal. They treated me like someone who got back up after being destroyed. And that meant more than any award or interview ever could. One day, while sorting files in the break room, I got a text from Julia. It was just a photo of her at a protest for medical abuse survivors, holding a sign that read, "Believe her, always." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. She already knew. I'd believed in myself when no one else did, and now I was quietly helping others do the same. I wasn't famous. I wasn't rich. But I was finally living. And that, to me, was the best kind of ending. Because it wasn't an ending at all. It was a beginning, the real one I should have had before betrayal, before prison, before being turned into a villain in someone else's narrative. Now, I write my own. So if you're reading this and wondering how I did it, how I clawed my way back after being buried alive by lies and betrayal, the answer isn't magic or revenge or even justice. The answer is simple. I remembered who I was. I chose to believe my truth, even when no one else would. And I refused to stay silent. So, here's to the reborn version of me. The woman who doesn't shrink herself to fit into someone else's illusion. The doctor who saves lives not because it's heroic, but because it's who I've always been. The survivor who is supposed to disappear forever but chose instead to come back stronger. My name is Rachel Carter, and this time, I'm not going anywhere.